So it's the 6th of September, and it's a difficult day in the New Testament today. Jesus says some pretty tough stuff. One of them, he quotes the Ten Commandments, you shall not murder. And he goes even further and says, but actually, if you're angry, you will be subject to judgment. And it doesn't mean that anger in and of itself is a sin, because we see Jesus getting angry with the Pharisees, we see him getting angry with the people who are lending money in the temple. God himself gets angry when he sees the way that the poor are being treated in our world. We see that all the way through the Bible. But what it is it's a strong command from Jesus to be careful not to allow anger to fester, because it can be a very dangerous thing. So he says, if you're calling someone a fool, you're in danger of the fire of hell. And what anger can do is it can lead us to do things that we wouldn't otherwise do if we hadn't had this thing like a raging fire inside of us. Anger spreads. You give it a foothold and it spreads, like through your mind and your thoughts, through your words, through your actions. It can cause us to do things. It can be like an engine to make us do things we wouldn't do otherwise. So he's very clear, and he says, basically, watch out for it and make sure that you go and reconcile with people quickly whenever you realize that there's a problem between the two of you. I find that most of my anger, maybe you're different, but most of my anger tends to be not because I'm angry on behalf of someone who can't defend themselves, which is what Jesus was angry about. Most of my anger is on my own behalf because someone's offended me or they haven't treated me how I felt I deserved to be treated. And that's where we can fall into danger. It's not that if people have done something, we don't have a reaction. Anger's a strange reaction. Often if they've hurt us, anger's a totally understandable reaction. But Jesus says, when you recognize it's there, actually choose to let it go and choose to reconcile. So who are the people today that you need to, maybe before God, say, all right, I'm going to let that go now? Second difficult one, he quotes again the Ten Commandments, you shall not commit adultery, and then goes further and says, but don't even think a lustful thought. Anyone who's lusting after someone has already committed adultery in their heart. Now, how do you live a life free of lust? I don't know, but he gives us some really strong instructions here, and he says basically, if your right eye is causing you to sin, rip it out. If your right hand's causing you to sin, cut it off. And what that means is be ruthless with the things that lead us to sin in life. So there was a guy who lived around 200 AD called Origen, and he was so struggling with lust that he quite literally chopped his balls off. Don't chop your balls off, but one thing that we can pick up on is patterns, things that cause us, if it's pornography, which is the obvious one with this, isn't it? If it's pornography, what are the patterns that lead us to sin? So is it sitting in our bedrooms late at night with our phone on an internet connection, just skipping aimlessly through? Is that when we find ourselves tripping up and stumbling and going somewhere we don't want to go? If that's a pattern, we identify that and then we cut it off early when we start to walk down that path. If we're serious about dealing with some of this stuff, we'll take the ruthless steps necessary to cut them out of our lives. Now, we'll make mistakes, and God's love for us always depends on his goodness, and it never depends on ours. But these are the commands of our Saviour, and we want to take them seriously and try and live them out as best we can today.